Brotherhood of the Eternal Light, teaching the Western mysteries, the spiritual path. The following video will teach you the wisdom of the mysteries in a humorous way. Teaching with humor has a long tradition, yet it does not mean that the teachings are any less serious. The Talmud records that the great sage Rabbah always began his lectures with humorous statements. This uplifted the students. According to the Baal-Shem Tov, humor is that thing that ushers a person's mind from a place of constricted consciousness, Katnut, to a place of expanded consciousness, Gadlut. How can we enable our soul to be closer to the divine? The divine may seem so far above us that it is nearly impossible to reach. If only there was any path that might bring us closer to the divine. In Christianity, some people have been told that the only way to get closer to the divine is through the help of the church. But is that really true? No, it is not. I have an idea. What if we could enter the very same path that the prophets of the Bible used to get closer to the divine? This path is called the Jacob's Ladder, or the Tree of Life. In order to enter this path, we must honestly dedicate ourselves to the spiritual path. Once we fully dedicate ourselves to the spiritual path and have passed the preliminary training, we become what is known as a Chassid, a pious one in traditional Qabbalistic texts. The degree of the Chassid can be seen as the first degree of initiation. Let the journey of the greater mysteries begin. Let us move beyond the material world. Having mastered the astral plane, the realm of visions, the Chassid becomes a seer. The journey must now continue to the mental plane. Having mastered the form aspects of the mental plane, the Chassid becomes a scholar, a master of logic and science. Soon he approaches the power aspect of the mental plane. Having mastered the power aspects of the mental plane, the Chassid becomes an artist and a master of the social aspect of life. Now the journey must continue to the higher mental plane. Having mastered the central aspect of the higher mental plane, the Chassid becomes ruler over all lesser aspects of life. Thus he will become a lesser adept, Adeptus Minor. The journey must now continue to the form aspect of the higher mental plane, the plane of karma. Having mastered the severity of the karmic plane, the adept becomes strong and powerful, like a warrior. Now the journey must continue to the mercy aspects of this plane. Here the adept will become deeply compassionate, and his heart will be filled with love for all beings. Having mastered all aspects of the higher mental plane, he becomes a Baal-Shem or miracle worker, and he is now a greater adept, Adeptus Major. Eventually, the adept is drawn towards the spiritual plane. As the adept seeks to progress further on the spiritual path, he approaches an abyss that separates mortals from the spiritual plane. He is stuck and cannot progress any further. Thus he suffers what mystics have called the dark night of the soul. In this time he will feel despair, and it may seem as if he had lost all connection to the higher worlds. And it will get even worse. In the worst hours of his spiritual journey, the adept will be tempted by the powers of darkness. If his heart is pure, he will eventually regain his strength. And he will resist the powers of darkness. This will lift the veil of darkness, and he will attain enlightenment. Thus he will pass the abyss. And he will become a Tzaddig, a true spiritual master or saint. If he progresses even further, he will get into contact with the power aspect of the spiritual plane. At this stage, he will be given the gift of prophecy, and he will be able to perceive the divine plan. This is the spiritual degree of the biblical prophets, such as Moses, who has perceived God face to face. Note that a prophet is on a much higher level than a mere seer, who can only see the astral plane. If he lives a perfect life and completes the destiny of his soul, he may pass on to the highest degree. At this stage, he will experience the Unio Mystica, unity with God. He is now an ha-Shalem, a complete or perfect human being, a true master of all aspects of life. And thus he is called a perfect Tzaddig, for he will have completed his work on earth. This is the spiritual degree of the biblical Henoch and of the prophet Elijah. And all the days of Henoch were 365 years, and Henoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Note that he did not die, the Bible just says, and he was not, for God took him. And at the end of his days he will not die, and he will not enter the cycle of reincarnation again, but be uplifted from this world. Like Henoch and Elijah, he will become a higher being, an archangel, and continue to exist on the spiritual plane. Learn more about the stages on the path of enlightenment in our free online course. or meet us on any of our live training events.